Hey guys, I'm KJ and this is Bookish Babbling. So today we are going to be talking about my favorite and my least favorite books of 2020. This is a little bit late, but better late than never. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to talk about a favorite, and then I'm going to talk about a least favorite, and then a favorite, and then a least favorite. And I'm going to rank them from, with least favorites, like the most inoffensive to like the one I want to chuck in the dumpster. And then for favorites, I'm going to do the ones that were really good to like all time I'm going to read for the rest of my life. So the first book I want to talk about is my sixth favorite of the year, and that is Luster by Raven Leilani. I gave this a 4-star. The reason it made it into my favorites list is that I can't stop thinking about it. I am constantly remembering funny parts of it or just parts that made me cringe, and the whole book is filled with just terrible, terrible, terrible characters. Like, they are just train wrecks of people.
Pot meat kettle.
The main character, she just makes just the worst choices possible. It's just so bad. It's like watching a car crash because you're like, oh. And just the writing, like the writing is what really got me. It was just so beautiful. And it was such like a millennial writing style too. I don't really know how to describe it more than just the references that were made and kind of the self-deprecating humor, and just everything about it felt very millennial. And I think one of my favorite quotes was, what was it? People say I'm an open book, men just can't read it, or something along those lines. Like, such brilliant writing. It's just so good. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Luster is about a girl who is having an affair with a married man, and she loses her job. And so she moves in with the married man and the man's wife, and they have a daughter who they adopted who is Black, and the main character is Black. And so she bonds with the daughter, and the parents want her to bond with the daughter. That's why they're allowing her to stay there. And it's just a train wreck. It's just a train wreck. But I loved it, and that's why it's on my top list for this year. So the first book on my least favorites list is Star Daughter by Chevette Dakar. This is just another young adult fantasy. And I hate to say that, but this is the book that really made me realize I've grown out of and don't particularly like young adult fantasies anymore. This story follows a girl who is part star as she goes up into the heavens and tries to compete in a contest so that she can save her dad who was injured. That's a very vague synopsis of it, but yeah, why didn't I like this book? The characters were just so typical YA characters. Like, the main character drove me insane. I remember I was buddy reading this and I complained about her like every other time we chatted. I just hated this main character. She was constantly thinking about the love interest, and like the worst shit would be going down, and she'd be like, I wonder if he thinks I'm cute. And I'm like, girl, priorities. I just really did not like this book. It was average in that, I read it. I think I gave it a 2-star. It was just like, okay, this happened. Moving on. Yeah, this was definitely the book that kind of cemented I need to decrease the number of YA fantasies I'm reading, because it just seems to be really repetitive now, and it has me like hating the genre. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid is my next pick for top books. I love this book. I actually named my new car Evelyn because of this book. The character of Evelyn reminds me so much of my great-grandmother, who was just a sassy, like, in control HBIC, and Evelyn completely embodied that, and it just, when I was reading it, it felt like my great-grandmother was telling me this stuff. I love that Evelyn is unapologetically flawed. She made some choices, and the choices weren't always good, but she presents them as, this is my story, I'm going to tell you my story. There were things that I did that weren't great. I have some regrets. And she will even say, like, but what you're thinking is my regret is definitely not my regret. I just really love that. It's funny because I really don't like old people. Like, I feel like that's a little controversial to say, but I just don't. Like, I just...
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
There's no words. Like, I just really don't like old people. They just... Sorry, but I don't. And so it's really funny that The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo made it on this list. But yeah, and I love the queer representation. Like, this is everything. I love celebrities. I am just like addicted to reading about the stupid shit they do. And so this is just my catnip. And on top of that, it's queer. Like, I mean, it's perfect. And it's set in a time, an era that I love. It's set in Hollywood, which I love. Like, there is nothing about this that I didn't love. The next book on my least favorites is Ghostwood Song by Erica Waters. I hated the audiobook for this. Hated it. I can't even. So I'm from Southern Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia area, and I have a bit of an accent, but that's the Appalachian area and kind of part of the South, I guess. And when I hear someone do a Southern accent that is so strong and so overpowering, it just seems so fake to me. And I just sit there and it completely pulls me out of the story. And that's how it was with this book. Like, I could not focus on what was going on because this Southern accent was like, oh my God, it was just not my cup of tea. And I've read books set in the South where the accent is not like this, like The Raven Cycle. Didn't have weird accent stuff. Legendborn, the accent was there. You could hear it, but it wasn't like this crazy draw. Like, I hated it. I'm sorry. I don't mean to go on and on. But it was so bad that I have no idea what happened in the plot. Also, again, I do think this is a me thing because I have a lot of resentment towards Appalachia, towards the South, because I lived there and it was a miserable time to be LGBTQ, to be the weird kid, because everyone was terrible to me. It's hard for me to read books set in that area. And so the book has to be outstanding for me to kind of set aside my own baggage. And this book just, I didn't feel like it was outstanding. So I think this is a combination of me hating the audiobook and the book being just kind of lackluster. Next up on my favorites list is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I love Leigh Bardugo. I've read the Shadow and Bone trilogy. That was not great, but I did read that. And then Six of Crows. That duology is one of my all-time favorites, and I didn't particularly like King of Scars, but that's a whole different story. I think this was a great book. I love the setting. I liked that there were dual timelines. I think, like, I'm still trying to figure out what I like and what I don't like in literature. I think we all love that one character. What is his name? It's a weird-ass name. It's like some really long name. I don't know. I will put it here. But yeah, I loved him. I loved our main character. She was a strong, kind of sassy, awesome character without kind of displaying the I'm not like other girls type attitude. I loved the academic setting. I loved going to college, and if I could, I would go to college for the rest of my life forever. And so this let me kind of sneak back in there for a bit, and I did love that. I like the plot. It's kind of a little fuzzy now because I did read this way back at the beginning of the year, and I think this year has just been such a mess that I've forgotten so much, but is there a sequel? I can't remember, but I really did like this one.
Could you sound any less enthusiastic?
The next book on my list is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. It's hard for me to talk about why I don't like this book without spoiling too much, but just know I didn't like it. I didn't like the twist. People were saying that it kind of had a build up and then it was super creepy and that the woman was super creepy. And honestly, I just wanted to shake her and be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why are you being so weird? And I just hated this book. I just hated it. I hated the ending. I hated the middle. I hated the beginning. The plot twist is not something we should be using as plot twists. Like, no. Nope. No. Basically, when I started the book, I knew pretty well what was going on. And so it was just like a constant, oh, please don't let this be it. Please don't let this be it. Please don't let this be it. And then it's revealed and I'm like, it is great. And so, no, this just rubbed me all the wrong way and I hated it. And I don't plan on watching the movie. And I don't know that I will ever pick up another book by Ian Reid. Like, no. The next book on my favorites list is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is only the second Sarah J. Maas I had read. Since then, I've read 3 more. The first 2 ACOTAR books and then another book in the Throne of Glass series. Before this, I had read the first Throne of Glass book. I really love this. I still look back on it and still really love it. I can't say I particularly like the main character or the love interest, Hunt. They were fine, but they seem kind of typical Sarah J. Maas characters. But I loved all of the side characters, like the badass, possibly evil witch lady, and then the little sprite, and just all the dog. Is it a dog? It's some type of creature that is her pet, and it is everything. But I just really loved the side characters. And I liked that it was a fantasy set in a completely different universe, but still having the modern amenities. So they still had a cell phone. They still had, I think, the internet. And I like that because sometimes you're reading a fantasy book and you're like, oh my God, if they just had a phone, this would not be an issue. And so I do like that they had those access to that stuff. I just really love this book. I don't even know what else to say. I cannot wait for the next book in the series. I will continue to make my way through Sarah J. Maas's backlist until then. But yeah, I think this was a really solid read. So my second least favorite book of the year was Even If We Break by Marika Nijkamp. This is a young adult thriller mystery type deal, and I just hated it. And I didn't hate it because it was particularly offensive. It just didn't do anything. And it could have. It really could have said a lot. It really could have meant a lot. There were representation for people on the autism spectrum. There was disability representation. There was LGBTQ representation. I believe there was non-binary representation. Like it was all there, and it was great. But great characters or great representation doesn't make a book great, and nothing about this book stood out to me. When we got to the end, it was just so campy and like everything's great, and let's hammer in the moral of the story, and let's tear jerk, and I just hated that. And I don't know if I just hate being happy or what it is, but it was just everything was so wrapped up so cleanly by the end and so sweetly that it was like, yeah, no. And like nothing about it made a lot of sense. Like the motivation for why it's happening doesn't make a lot of sense. The characters' reactions don't make a ton of sense. Like this book was just weird and just not good. And I think it's so high up on the list because it could have been good, but it wasn't good. It was really bad, and I'm really sad about it. So my second top book of the year is Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. I have said this in a couple different comments and talked about it with some people, but I don't necessarily know that this book is objectively a very good book. Like, yeah, I think the writing is great, and I do like Rory Power's unique way of telling stories. But for me, I read this book at a time where I really needed it. And it just gave me this feeling of like being seen and someone understanding the complexity and the difficulties with relationships, especially maternal relationships. And I don't really want to go into specifics because that's personal and there's no need to drag that onto this channel. Objectively, maybe it's a 3 or 4 star read, but for me, just everything I felt while reading it, just I could not list this as one of my favorites. The final book I am going to talk about, and the one that I have been wanting to rant about this since I read it back in October.
You got so excited to spill the tea that you forgot to say what book it is. Girl, get it together.
I just hate it. I hate it so much. So many people read this book, and when they read it, they're like, oh, it's just only people who really like weird books are going to get this and are going to like it. And it almost feels like it's like an exclusive club or something. I don't know. I can't really put into words what that feels like, but I read it and I'm like, I fucking hate this book. I hate these characters. I hate this plot. I don't know what happened. I have a general understanding of what happened, but like, why? I don't care. This main character, Inez, oh my God, I have never wanted to beat someone up. I've never wanted to beat someone up. I would fuck Inez up. Like, she's just like wandering around, like not giving two shits about what's going on around her. And I think one of the reasons this makes me so mad is that Inez is given the opportunity to go to this school that presidents go to, and that like once you go to this school and you graduate, you're set for life. And she just doesn't care. She doesn't care. Like she hardly goes to her classes. Like the first semester, she's basically flunking everything. All she's doing is like drinking and partying. And that's fine. If that's your deal, that's fine. But she's given this great opportunity. And once she gets out of it, she's not going to be in any debt or anything. And I'm sitting here like, are you fucking kidding me right now, girl? Like, you could be on a path to greatness. Like, that's literally being given to you. And you're just not doing anything. You're literally not doing anything. And not only that, but you could be involved in like this weird mystery and go on this weird adventure. And instead you're like, I don't know, some weird shit's happening, but it's gonna happen over there. I'm gonna be here. And it's like, what the fuck? No, I hate this book. Hate this book. I need to take some breaths because this book makes me so angry. And it makes me angry how it feels like it's an exclusive, like you're just not smart enough to understand it type feeling I get from people who love it. And not all people who love it, but from some people who love it. And it's just like, no, I'm smart enough to get it. I just hate it, you know? Okay, deep breaths. We are done talking about my least favorites. And that means we get to wrap it up with my most favorite book of 2020. And that was Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth. Just like with Catherine House, I have no idea what happened. I don't really know what the ending meant or why it happened. But when I was along for the ride, I was having such a good time. It's told as like a story and a story and a story that's a movie. And it's just all these complex different parts happening and coming together and coming apart in just like the most beautiful way. And it's so gay. It's so gay. And I love that. I love it. And
Emily M. Danforth said gay rights.
what else? Like there's a snarky writer and there's an actress and there's some weird shit going on in kind of an academic setting. This is everything to me. And not only that, but there's polyamorous representation in there, which obviously is going to be my thing. And I love this book. I love it. And I want to read it with everyone. I want everybody to read it with me and then talk about that ending with me and help me process it and help me see all the beautiful, intricate stuff that happened. And this book is so good. And it's funny because it feels kind of like Catherine House in that you have this school setting and it's kind of makes you feel kind of trippy and it's a weird, kind of isolated, interesting feeling. But let me tell you, like Plain Bad Heroines does it so much better. And those of you who haven't read it, why? Why haven't you read it? Like, I really feel like you should. Like, I really feel like you should. So yeah, those are my most favorites and least favorite books of 2020. I know that the further I got along on the list, the more I devolved into just kind of screaming about what I liked and didn't like. I apologize. That's just who I am as a person. So if you want to comment below what your favorites were, what your least favorites were, if you have any hot takes on my favorites or least favorites, if you have any recommendations based on what I liked or what I didn't like, please leave them below. I definitely want to hear from you, and I will be communicating with you in the comments. Bye.
And now for the outtakes.
Hold on. Like, what are you doing? Chill. We're not having wrestling matches on the floor right now. Besides hating Cornelius Snow, Coriolanus, when I was reading this, I said Coranus, but I know that's not right.